In the winter of 1959, 9 young hikers set out into the northern Ural Mountains of the Soviet Union. They were students and recent graduates from the Ural Polytechnic Institute in Sverdlovsk, led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, a methodical and respected leader among his peers. The plan was to complete a demanding trek to Mount Otterton, a route rated as Category 3, the most difficult level recognized at the time. The group consisted of experienced mountaineers: Zinaida Kolmogorova, Lyudmila Dubinina, Rustam Slobodin, Alexander Kolvatov, Yuri Doroshenko, Nikolai Thyborgsbrignol, Semyon Zolotaryov and Yuri Krivonishenko. A 10th member, Yuri Yudin, joined at the start but was forced to turn back due to illness, a decision that would later save his life. They carried everything they needed: skis, tents, stoves, journals and cameras. Their journey began on January 27th. For several days everything went according to plan. The group documented every step in their diaries, often joking and taking photos. They were tired but morale was high. By February 1st, they had reached the slopes of a mountain known by the local Mansi people as Kholat Syakhl, Mountain of the Dead. Poor visibility and worsening weather forced them to stop and pitch their tent on the exposed slope, instead of descending to the forest for better shelter. It was a calculated, if risky, decision. That night, sometime after they settled in, something went terribly wrong. When the hikers failed to return on schedule, rescue teams were sent out. After a long search on February 26th, the group's tent was discovered partially buried in snow. What rescuers found made little sense. The tent had been slashed open from the inside. Inside were the hikers' boots, coats, and personal belongings, left behind in an orderly manner. Food was laid out as if dinner had been interrupted. It appeared that all 9 had left in a hurry, some barefoot, some wearing only socks, despite the temperature being around -30 degrees Celsius. Footprints in the snow led downhill toward the forest. They showed that several people had walked calmly, not run. The prints gradually faded in the snow and darkness. At the edge of the forest, about a mile from the tent, searchers found the first 2 bodies, Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko, lying under a large cedar tree. They were barefoot, wearing only their underwear. Nearby was the remains of a small fire, and the branches of the cedar were broken high above, as if someone had climbed it, perhaps to look for the tent or to escape something. Both men had died of hypothermia. Between the cedar and the tent, 3 more bodies were found: Dyatlov, Kolmogorova and Slobodin. Their positions suggested they had been trying to crawl back to camp. Dyatlov's hands were clenched, facing toward the tent. Zinaida's body was found a few hundred meters behind him. Slobodin had a fractured skull, but investigators said it wasn't enough to have killed him. All 3 appeared to have frozen to death. It took another 2 months to find the remaining 4 hikers. When the snow finally melted in May, their bodies were discovered in a ravine farther into the woods. The discovery only deepened the mystery. These last 4 were better dressed, wearing some of the clothing taken from the others, suggesting that they had survived longer. But their injuries were shocking. Thyborgsbrignol's skull was crushed with immense force. Dubinina and Zolotaryov had multiple broken ribs and massive internal damage, similar to the trauma of a car crash, yet their bodies showed no external wounds. Dubinina's eyes were missing and her tongue was gone. Some of their clothing contained traces of radiation. None of the explanations fit cleanly. There were no signs of a struggle among the group and no evidence of intruders. The campsite showed no tracks except their own. The area had no record of dangerous wildlife, and the broken tent didn't suggest an animal attack. The official Soviet investigation was closed with a vague conclusion: the hikers had died due to an unknown compelling force. That statement became famous, and for decades it fueled speculation. The avalanche theory was the first and most common. Investigators argued that a small slide of snow could have pushed part of the tent, forcing the group to cut it open and flee in panic. But the evidence didn't fully match. The slope angle was shallow, and there were no signs of snow displacement large enough to crush or bury the tent. Items inside were still standing upright. When rescuers arrived weeks later, the tent wasn't completely buried, only lightly covered. Other researchers have proposed that the group might have misjudged the conditions. Perhaps snow buildup above the tent shifted suddenly, creating the illusion of an oncoming avalanche. In panic, they might have run into the storm to escape what they thought was imminent danger. Disoriented, they froze to death before finding their way back. Another theory points to human causes: Soviet military testing. In 1959, the region was occasionally used for parachute mine experiments and missile tests. Some witnesses reported strange orange lights in the sky during the same week. The injuries could be consistent with shockwaves from airborne explosions. The traces of radiation on the hikers' clothes added to the suspicion. Yet there are problems with that too. There were no signs of burns and the trees nearby weren't damaged. If military personnel were involved, the area would likely have been sealed off, not left open for civilian search teams. Psychological explanations have also been discussed. One involves infrasound low-frequency vibrations created by the wind around the mountains. Some scientists believe such sounds can cause anxiety, dizziness, or panic. In theory, the noise could have triggered fear in the hikers, driving them to flee without reason. But again, that remains speculation, and there's no direct evidence it occurred that night. More fringe ideas, UFO encounters, Yeti attacks, secret weapons, or even radiation poisoning, have appeared in books and documentaries, but none stand up to scrutiny. The only certainty is that something caused 9 trained, rational people to behave in a way that led to their deaths. The Dyatlov Pass case remained dormant for decades. In 2019, Russian authorities reopened the investigation. They concluded in 2020 that a slab avalanche was the most likely cause. In this version, a small block of snow shifted under the surface, frightening the hikers and injuring some as it collapsed onto the tent. Panicked and disoriented, the group retreated downhill in freezing winds. By the time they tried to regroup, the cold had overwhelmed them. Some experts accept that conclusion as plausible. Others argue it still doesn't explain the full range of injuries, or why experienced mountaineers would have fled so far without equipment. Yuri Yudin, the sole survivor, spent his life trying to understand what had happened to his friends. He worked closely with investigators, journalists, and researchers for decades. He examined the recovered items countless times and studied the terrain himself. Until his death in 2013, he insisted that something about the official reports never added up. Over the years, recovered photos and diary pages have helped piece together the group's final days. Their last journal entries mention jokes, songs, and plans for the next day's hike. The tone is normal, calm, and optimistic. There's no sign of fear or conflict. That makes the ending even harder to grasp. What stands out most about this case isn't just the mystery itself, but how methodical these young people were. They documented everything, every meal, every stop, every small challenge. Their attention to detail gives modern investigators a rare glimpse into their mindset. They weren't careless. They weren't unprepared. Whatever happened that night must have been something they couldn't anticipate or control. Today, the site where they died is known as Dyatlov Pass, named in honor of their leader. Visitors still trek there each year to leave flowers or memorial plaques. The tent's position has been reconstructed, the route retraced, and every item catalogued. Despite the decades of analysis, no single explanation fits every fact. Some see the Dyatlov Pass incident as a tragic lesson in the power of nature, how quickly the environment can turn against even the most skilled hikers. Others see it as an unsolved riddle from the Cold War era, where secrecy and suspicion clouded the truth. What's undeniable is that 9 people died on that mountainside, far from help, in circumstances that remain uncertain. Their story has been retold in documentaries, research papers, and countless debates, but the essential mystery endures. Each generation revisits the evidence, hoping that new technology or new insight will finally close the case. Yet every answer raises new contradictions. That's why the Dyatlov Pass incident continues to captivate scientists, historians, and ordinary listeners around the world. It isn't because of supernatural theories or conspiracy rumors, it's because something happened there that we still can't fully explain. Something powerful enough to make 9 experienced people abandon safety and walk into lethal cold. After all these years, their story remains one of the most puzzling events in modern history, a tragedy frozen in time, with questions that still have no clear answer.